Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Our first story will be about the service situation in which our OP finds himself. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Sergeant wants me to pull armed guard duty with broken arm. Let's do it. So, backstory. Around 2013, I was stationed at a recently shut down U.S. Army garrison in South Korea. I was attached to a unit known as United Nations Command Honor Guard. This was a multinational honor guard with representative military branches from a few different countries all living together. We did ceremonies for all bigwigs that came into the country, as well as armed security for very sensitive buildings on the installation. Those of us in the U.S. Army, along with our South Korea counterparts, were solely responsible for the guard work. I'll refrain from using certain buildings by name as they were highly sensitive buildings requiring a lot of security. They're more like underground bunkers for doomsday situations with windows and doors painted on to fool any satellites. This is where my story begins. I'd broken my hand and arm shortly after arriving in Korea through faults of my own. I was in a hard cast and deemed unable to perform armed guard or ceremonies until I healed, so I primarily ran radio checks and did patrolling rounds to catch anyone sleeping on duty. On this particular day, I was supposed to be off duty, but I was awoken by the sergeant of the guard, who was also my squad leader. We'll call him Sergeant K. He had an M9 with 2 mags and a pistol belt in his hand. Before I can muster the words to explain I'm off, I'm informed there's someone special in town and we must up the guard's count. I try to explain there's no way in hell I can safely pull an armed guard duty with a broken shooting hand and arm. At this point, I was technically considered unqualified for the M9 since I hadn't been to a shooting range for it in months. He tells me, just take it and go by the book. I was put into a building that has a foot-thick vault door made of steel that leads to a protected guard booth. There's another door of equal size that leads to stairs that go to an underground tunnel that leads to a network of conference rooms, as well as a large command hub. I've been on duty for around 2 hours at this station, reading over the standard operating procedure for this particular hub. I noticed the book has a typo that clearly states only visitors that possess X color badge with X level security clearance are permitted to access this facility, when in reality it should have stated only X at minimum level security clearance may access, and all colors indicating higher security clearances are allowed access as well. Initiate compliance. In walks this British Army general in plain clothes. I ask for military ID to confirm who he is. He responds in good fashion, "I shall certainly not have to show you who I am." I calmly stare that this is the rule, and as I'm not accustomed to him, I can't take his word. He finally shows me his access badge, which unfortunately for him is the highest level he's able to get. I show him the book and clearly point he can't access this facility unless he only has a X clearance and no higher. The look on his face was almost too much to keep from laughing and breaking composure. He turns bright red and walks out. I'm sure thinking I'm dim-witted. 10 minutes later, I have a royally pissed off Sergeant First Class, E7, pounding his fist on my ballistic glass window. He's screaming, "Open the GD door, specialist, before I skull drag you through the window." Now, I've met this man before, and he's typically a nice guy and helpful, but he's just found out I refused the British Army envoy access to the command meeting. This particular sergeant is the paper jockey for the 4-star general of the entire Korean Peninsula and Asian theater. He's been sent by the general's orders to adjust me. I asked to see the sergeant's security access before I open the door to get skull dragged. Unfortunately for him, book says he needs X. He has higher than X, so I refused. About 20 minutes later, I have the entirety of my command staff in the room with me screaming and hollering, threatening to chapter me out for disobedience. I calmly asked to explain my actions and the circumstances. The sergeant from earlier arrives just in time for the explanation. He's still beat red and fuming to high hell. I open the book and point at it and tell them I went by the book as ordered by Sergeant K, and the book states that only X was allowed. And as stupid and ridiculous as it sounded, the book says anyone with a higher clearance was not authorized. The looks around this tiny room are of hysteria and defeat. The first one to laugh is this PO'd sergeant from earlier who took the book and trashed it in the burn box and walked out. My CO and XO and PL spent that night typing a new SOP for all gut stations. And Sergeant K was confined to pulling 24-hour guard shifts every other day for a week as punishment for making an unqualified and physically incapable shooter pull an armed guard shift. And I was exempted from guard duty until the cast came off. And our second story. So I can't park here, huh? This is not my story, but my coworker, but it's too good to pass up. I work in an office that does internal work, and downstairs is the retail location. It's a decently small 3-story building that houses over 150 plus people on rotation shifts. My internal department works from 7 till midnight, while the retail downstairs is only open 8 to 5. Well, my coworker, who's a bad A retired cop, Bark from here on out, works with me simply for the health insurance or because he needs to stay busy, more than likely both. He doesn't really need the job for money's sake. Well, there are very specific rules that in the parking lot, we can't just take up the first 4 rows to leave it for customers until the retail location closes. Well, Bark has a disability where he really can't walk too far as he's old and was injured on the job when he was a cop. To be kind, he always parks as far as he can without trying to meddle in the way of customers. Well, this lovely week, the retail manager decided that he was tired of seeing Bark's car parked in the last spot in the 4th row and decided to send a site email saying that he'll tow the car parked in this spot with a picture of Bark's car attached to the email. Now, Bark is a nice man, but being a retired cop, he has no patience for BS threats. So after managers approached him telling him to move his car, he went downstairs and drove to the first spot in the parking lot assigned to handicap, pulled in, made sure that his handicap placard was nice and shiny, and displayed proudly. Not a peep was heard from management, and no tow truck was called. He said he was going to park there a few more days and then move it back to his old spot. And our last story. Project Skunk, an engineer's tale. Decades ago, I worked the worst crap job of my life as a software engineer writing code for an OBD2 car code scanner at a completely dysfunctional business I'm not going to name. But I'll drop a hint and say all of their products are orange. It was right after 9/11. I was laid off and jobs were nearly impossible to find, but I managed to land one there, and out of desperation, I took the job. And there I met probably the best friend I ever made at work. I'll call him Agent S. Agent S was a coder's coder, a real laid-back guy and an all-around good egg. Imagine if the dude could code, you'd pretty much have Agent S. We had many wonderful overlong lunches working there, and I needed the calm he taught me because that place was nuts. All the departments poisonously hated each other. The head of engineering was as paranoid as a Russian czar, rampant abuse, theft, the works. A total madhouse. But eventually everyone has their limits, and Agent S had put in his 2 weeks' notice just to let you know how nice he was. He was the only person that quit that wasn't escorted to his car immediately by an armed guard, which was standard procedure. He was permitted to put in his last 2 weeks. So imagine my surprise when Agent S said, "I want some payback before I go." Maybe a few days earlier, the paranoid czar of engineering gave us this odd missive. When you leave your desk for any reason, you are to take your papers on your desk and lock them in your desk. You're to lock your computer. You are to put a password in your BIOS and shut down your machine when you leave for the night. You are to erase your marker boards, leave no scrap of paper out or any hint of what you're working on, and no explanation why, which was standard for him. Just do it. Of course, we all wanted to know why, so our man in the field, I'll call him Bond, went about finding out. Bond was social and likable and had friends in every department in this increasingly balkanized organizational structure. I'll ask around and don't tell anybody. He found out. Engineering czar got word somehow that people in the sales department were working late and waiting for engineering to leave. Once we left, they were going through our desks and computers looking for clues as to what we were working on. They would then copy this stuff down, claim it as a project I'm heading up, and present the material to their superiors so they could look valuable and get raises and all that fun sales stuff. Yes, I know, sales is supposed to query their customers for features they'd like, then make proposals to engineering. I did say this place is dysfunctional, right? Engineers drove the product design since sales couldn't be bothered, and why should they, when they could just steal it instead, right? So Agent S had enough. We made Project Skunk. All projects in this place were named after an animal. We decided to leave a hint in the name that was not as it should be, and we dreamed up the most amazing OBD2 scanner in the world. Here's some of the specs. Since everybody knows 32-bit processors are more expensive than 8-bit processors, we'd save money by using a 2-bit processor. The EEPROMs that held the automotive database were expensive as well, so to save space, we'd use zip to compress the database 12 times and store it on a single 4K EEPROM. Predictive analysis. If you enter in the last few codes your car threw, it would extrapolate and tell you the next part of your car that was going to break. I thought of this one, I'm especially proud of it. And so on. We spent a happy afternoon drawing up box diagrams with flux capacitors and n-dimensional grommets and yo-yo dyne compensators, lots of specs and analysis and other assorted bits of utter nonsense. We scattered them all over Agent S's desk, then went home. The very next day, our man in the field, Bond, gives us the news. Project Skunk is a hit. The entire building's buzzing over it. Salespeople are tripping over each other, taking credit. It took about a week before the stolen goods were finally passed upstream to the six-figure guys before someone with half a clue noticed that everything in the project was absolutely effing impossible. Agent S had left by then, but I tracked him down and we had lunch. I told him the result of the ill harvest he'd left behind. Sales had been seriously embarrassed in front of their superiors, and the ones over them as well. I don't know if anything came of it. It was an old boys network there, and I'm sure they covered for each other somehow, but they were embarrassed and they were hurt. How do I know? Every day from that day on, anytime a person from sales passed me in a hallway or something, they would physically turn their face from me to shun me. It was hilarious, like somehow I'm the a-hole for making fake stuff for them to steal. They went under not too long after that. The building's now a medical company supplying COVID masks. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.